Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're basically tearing up the conventional driving manual to uncover the hidden psychology of being behind the wheel. We spend all these hours learning how to perfectly parallel park or memorizing exactly what a yield sign means. But how often do we actually stop to think about what's going on inside our own heads while we're navigating a 2-ton machine at highway speeds? Well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. We're going to explore the fascinating science of driver maturity, how we process risk, and the unwritten rules of the road. So let's kick this off with a pretty counterintuitive question. Does acing your theory test and memorizing every single traffic sign actually guarantee you're going to be a safe driver out there in reality? The surprising answer, at least according to the research, is no, not at all. Knowing the rules is really just the baseline. True safety relies way more heavily on your psychological development, how your brain processes risks, and how you react when you're under pressure.
Section 1. Beyond the Rulebook.
Let's start by looking at how you actually learn to drive in the first place, and why some of those common study habits you might have relied on could secretly be failing you out on the real roads. Now, there are 4 distinct types of learning that happen when you get behind the wheel. The trap most of us fall into right away is superficial learning. That's when you just cram everything by heart the night before to pass your theory test. You learn the facts, sure, but you don't really grasp the big picture. And honestly, you're going to forget it all next week. What you really want to strive for is deep learning, where you actually try to understand the reasons behind the rules. That's what leads to permanent, lifelong knowledge. There's also imitation learning, which is just copying others, and well, that's really only as good as the person you happen to be copying. But let's focus on the ultimate physical goal of driving, and that is overlearning. Overlearning has happened when a physical action has literally become second nature. Think about working the clutch, shifting gears, checking your mirrors. These mechanics absolutely must be overlearned. Why? Because when your body knows how to do them automatically, without a single conscious thought, your brain is finally freed up to focus entirely on everything happening around you in the traffic environment.
Section 2. Stages of driver maturity.
Now, getting older doesn't automatically make you a mature driver. It just doesn't. In fact, we evolve through 3 distinct psychological phases. You start out immature and selfish. This is basically the toddler stage of driving. You act impulsively, think mostly of yourself, and honestly, you just create confusion. Then you graduate to being rule-abiding. This is generally a good thing in most situations, but when the rules just aren't enough to solve a problem, rule-abiding drivers tend to panic. They often revert right back to being immature by angrily insisting on their right of way. The ultimate goal, the gold standard, is stage 3, tolerant and mature. This driver respects the rules, for sure, but they have the experience to handle the unexpected calmly. If a car stalls at a green light in front of them, they don't just lean on the horn in a blind rage. They take a breath and they calmly adapt.
Section 3. When to break the rules.
Okay, here is where we completely shatter the illusion. Getting to that mature, tolerant stage we were just talking about sometimes means doing the exact opposite of what you were taught in driving school. The crucial point here is a pretty shocking revelation direct from our source material. Strict 100% adherence to traffic rules is actually a bad thing. Let that sink in. To truly display good judgment when interacting with other road users, there are times when it is entirely reasonable and frankly expected that you depart from the strict letter of the law. Let me give you a perfect example of this. The cogwheel principle. You might know it as a zipper merge. This is an unwritten guideline where every other car takes turns driving to merge into a single lane, interlocking, just like the teeth of a cogwheel coming together. Now, this principle isn't explicitly written into formal priority legislation anywhere, but using it shows incredible maturity because it efficiently resolves traffic jams when rigid, by-the-book right-of-way rules would just cause a total massive standstill. Now, hold on, you can't just go totally rogue out there. You can only deviate from the rules if 3 very strict conditions are met. First off, it absolutely must benefit the traffic situation as a whole, like reducing a massive queue. Second, everyone involved has to be completely aware of what's happening. This requires a lot of caution, extreme clarity, and direct eye contact with the other drivers. And third, and this is the big one, you must never, ever deviate from the rules just to benefit yourself. It's always about putting the collective flow first. Section 4. The psychology of risk. This brings us perfectly to how your brain assesses danger out in the real world. You'd probably think brand new drivers with fresh ink on their licenses are the most dangerous, right? But actually, the timeline of overconfidence reveals that young men tend to overestimate their driving ability significantly later on. The real danger zone hits when they've had their license for a couple of years. Why? Well, the initial nervousness completely wears off, they develop a totally false sense of supreme confidence, and they actively start taking much greater risks. This overconfidence ties directly into this totally fascinating psychological concept called probability learning. This is basically when your brain uses past experiences to assess the likelihood of something happening in the future. Now, good probability learning is when you're used to a high-risk situation, so you're extra cautious. Makes sense. But bad probability learning, that is a silent killer. That's when a rare occurrence lulls you into a false sense of security and makes you completely careless. Let's make this visual. Imagine you drive a route every single day that has an unguarded railway crossing. If you've crossed those tracks 100 times without ever seeing a single train, your brain might automatically tell you, hey, there's never a train here, and you just decide to stop looking. That is bad probability learning in action. The one time you assume you're safe purely because of past luck, that could be fatal. Good probability learning, on the other hand, means knowing the tracks are there and actively checking carefully every single time, regardless of what happened yesterday.
Section 5. Stress and peer pressure. Finally, let's explore the hidden hazards sitting right inside the cabin with you. We're talking about your internal stress levels. Now, a little bit of moderate stress can actually be a good thing. It keeps you alert and focused. But excessive stress? That is terrifying. Just imagine you're running late for a massive, life-changing job interview, and you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper rush hour traffic. This kind of excessive stress can trigger panic, where you literally just freeze and don't know what to do. Or agitation, making you hyperactive, jumpy, and totally unpredictable. It can even cause a literal blackouts, where you completely stop being aware of the road. Or sluggishness, which completely destroys your ability to think logically. To prevent all this, the material strongly stresses the need to plan your time, drive well-rested, and just avoid rush hours whenever you possibly can. And then, of course, we have the people sitting right next to you. Peer pressure naturally prompts us to alter our behavior, and it can go one of two ways, positive or negative. Positive peer pressure is a good friend leaning over and telling you to slow down when you're taking a corner just a bit too fast. But negative peer pressure is incredibly common and insanely dangerous. If you're running late to a concert and your friends are groaning and complaining in the back seat, you feel that pressure, right? You increase your speed and you take massive, unnecessary risks just to appease them. In fact, the data reveals a pretty terrifying truth here. The absolute most dangerous situation on the road, the absolute peak of negative peer pressure and risk-taking, is a young driver accompanied by a group of young male passengers. If you ever find yourself as a passenger in this specific situation, never ever rush the driver, not even as a joke. They might have low self-confidence and actually take your joke as a direct command to drive recklessly. Speak up if the driving is dangerous. Honestly, it often relieves the silent, intense pressure that the driver is putting on themselves. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought to ponder the very next time you put your keys in the ignition. Have you really achieved that true tolerant maturity on the road? Do you genuinely understand the deep psychology behind your own snap reactions? Or are you just surviving out there on superficial learning, a really rigid adherence to the rulebook, and a massive, healthy dose of good luck? Something to think about. Stay safe out there, stay aware, and keep learning.